Orangers, juicers. Actually, that's you know what, juicers. That's what I'm gonna call you from now on, juicers. Welcome back, juicers. So initially, this video is gonna look at a specific American Dad episode, the mall episode. You Are Here. So the first part of this video is still going to be about that episode and the implications of that ending. But the other portion of the video is going to look at Tuttle as one of the show's more unique side characters. It's not going to be like a deep dive where, like, you know, we're going to look at like his entire history of like who he was before being Tuttle and all that stuff, but more like a look at his powers or whatever. We'll get there. Anyway, let's look at the episode. So the episode begins with Roger's persona, Erastus, explaining his job as the mall care owner. So the mall pretty much is like just a dying store. It's just like, or a dying mall. And as he explains it, without an anchor store, the mall will like probably shut down. But Roger assures us that the owner, Mr. Javits, is working on bringing back a big store to bring business back to the dead mall. Oh, by the way, this episode is inspired by this documentary called Jasper's Mall, or Jasper Mall, and all you have to do is look at the trailer of this documentary, and you'll see a lot of the scenes are pretty much taken from that. But this episode has a very interesting show title opening that, from what I can remember, only one other episode has like done a unique opening title. But this one has Roger mopping the floor, and the sign, the lights on the signs of the stores go out, but then come back on, spelling out American Dad. While in the background you actually hear like an instrumental version of the introduction, like being played through the mall speakers. It's just like a really interesting intro that outside of that other episode, like has never been done. And it's just a neat little thing that separates this episode from other episodes, or, you know, just makes it more unique than other episodes. As far as I could tell, it is just 2 episodes that do like this unique intro, other than, you know, the cold open and the regular intro openings. If there are more than just two of those episodes, don't tell me. I don't care. I will personally just rewatch the show, and I'll find the episode if it does exist. After the introduction, we find out that the entire sequence was done for a documentary crew who, like, they get pretty bored quickly of the idea of making a movie on the mall and decide to record monster trucks, which honestly is much cooler. Here we get to see a photo of Mr. Javits, the owner of the mall. Now, call me crazy, but I'm pretty sure this is a reference to Hot Fuzz, and that the portrait of Mr. Javits is supposed to look like the portrait of Simon Skinner, minus the toothy grin that you see in that movie. Here, you could just look it up here right now and compare it for yourself. Kind of looks the same, right? Anyway, afterwards, we have the Smith family ditching Steve with the excuse of him needing to get a summer job, while they goof off and run a food truck. Which, out of all the B plots of this show has ever had, I think this is the one that's more out of the left field than most other B plots. Like, in terms of like the build up and the logic of them coming to this conclusion, we sort of just get dropped off at like where normally the B plot in the episode would be like in its second stage or whatever. I don't know, it just seems very weird that we get to this point where like the family just agreed to do this just out of nowhere thing. Like, the only time I think we get like something even more stranger than that is like when Stan and Francine adopt that African kid. But even then, there was some form of logic to it before they even adopted him. Really, the only weird thing about that one was just like the ending sequence, or the near to end sequence where they are trying to find him in that Costco. Still, I don't know. It just seems very weird, but it doesn't matter because it works out for them later in the episode. Steve then argues as to why he couldn't find work at the Not Dying Mall, and they explain that they just don't want to be associated with him when they're shopping there. So then they kind of just drive off and sell their fish sticks. Steve wanders the mall, and Erastus catches up to him, offering a job. Erastus then goes through the hiring process and gives Steve a tour of the mall, which then leads to Steve working on his first day, even though he never really accepted the job. But who gives a shit about that? There he is. our boy Tuttle, the main character of this video. Steve asks Tuttle, like, why he's at the mall, and which Tuttle just explains that he works out here. And then we get introduced to 2 store owners. One of them runs the suit store, and we get a little suit joke store name joke thing. The important one is just that there's a store called The Suit Life of Zack and Cody. And the other store owner is just a lady who sells extremely specific greeting cards. And after our introduction, Roger comes in and we find out that the mall is going to be demolished. There's a demo crew outside who are just excited to blow up the mall. They're just really eager, but are just setting up the explosions a month ahead of time. But during this sequence, it's just very weird because I don't think I've ever looked at the demolition crew. There's just a 3D model of a shopping cart in the background, and it's just so distracting. It might be the colors or just like how detailed this model of a shopping cart is compared to like the rest of their background. But I've never looked at the crew during their explanation. I'm just constantly staring at that shopping cart. It is just extremely distracting. Just look at it. It's just there. Anyway, evil bankers show up, and we learn that they want to blow up the mall for condos.
Build condos.
Condos? The worst hoes?
Whoa.
Which I guess is the reason that makes them evil, because they do have a legit reason as to why they want to blow up the mall, since, you know, the owner, Mr. Javits, hasn't been paying his mortgage. So then this leads to Steve and Roger working together to come up with ideas to save the mall. It's then revealed that pretty much Mr. Javits hasn't come back in 25 years. So there's like no real reason as to save the mall. But after this revelation, we get to our B plot where the Smiths food truck is just failing because they didn't get a funny name. Klaus then suggests a sexually funny name, and immediately the food truck blows up. The name for this one is called Fishy Got Fingered, which, you know, is a Freddy Got Fingered parody. Daddy, would you like some sausage? Some sausage? Some sausage? Daddy, would you like some sausage? Some sausage? Anyway, we're back to our A plot with the store owners and Tuttle coming along with the ideas. Steve then comes up with the idea of merging the B plot with the A plot by having a food truck sale at the food court in order to make money. Also, we find out that Roger's breeding wild dogs. But the food truck idea works out in the end, except Steve pretty much like gives Roger a wake-up call and tells him that they can't save them all, just doing this constantly. And Roger runs off crying, but then Steve runs after him to comfort him, and that's when we see the Bone Man fly in, Mr. Javits, which turns out that Mr. Javits was a warlock the entire time, and that the reason Roger has like this deep respect for Mr. Javits is just because he was hypnotized by him by looking into his red glowing eyes. Steve freaks out, and then Roger reveals that the food truck idea came from Steve, and Mr. Javits is like super impressed by that, and he's like, dude, I want to hypnotize you, just look in my eyes. Here we also find out that the reason the mall is dying is apparently every 25 years or so, the mall needs to eat before just, you know, being revitalized and having people come back in, which Mr. Javits just does it for the fun of it because he's nice. After this, Steve runs off, and we learn that all the shop owners are actually ghosts, and they're essentially trying to keep people away from the mall so that they don't get consumed by the fountain in the mall, which explains why the stores are incredibly lame as hell, like the Sloat Meal or the Suit Store or the extremely specific greeting cards. Now I want you to take note here, just pay real close attention here. Only people who were fed to the fountain are trapped in the mall. I just want you to remember that for later. It is a very specific thing that will lead to something much more specific later. Also, the fates for these ghosts is that eventually their spirits will fade away and just turn into mannequins. So Steve and store owners have a plan to blow up the fountain, although the greeting card lady just turns into a mannequin pretty quickly. And then we get it into a musical number where Roger starts singing, and Steve attempts to evacuate the mall filled with hungry people, which after the musical number ends, Roger attempts to kill Steve, and then Mr. Javits saves Steve, which results in Roger trying to kill Mr. Javits, and then the fountain destroys Mr. Javits, and the story just kind of ends there. Now we get to the actual important part of the episode, which is the suit store owner ghost reveals who was a ghost and who wasn't a ghost in the mall. mall, but I want you to pay real close attention here. It's revealed that Tuttle is a ghost. The issue here is that Tuttle comes to the mall to work out. The ghosts that were consumed by the mall are bound to the mall, which means that Tuttle is a free ghost, meaning that he, even though he's still dead, it's not because of the mall. Now, there are a few points throughout the show where we can actually try to guess where Tuttle had died. So if we go backwards from this episode, then the first episode we could guess that Tuttle could have died in was the witness protection episode, The Book of Fisher, which came out in the same season, although recently I found out that it's the network's decision as to when an episode airs, so it's very likely that the writers didn't plan for this episode to air before The Book of Fisher or vice versa, or even plan for this at all. But even with this information, let's just assume that this was intended, then Tuttle could have been killed by one of the mobsters, even though the plot says that all the mobsters that knew Tuttle was alive were dead. There still could be other mobsters that just could have randomly seen Tuttle alive during a vacation or something like that. Who knows? So then Tuttle could have died there. Or if we just go logically, then we can go even further back to that episode, The Hand That Rocks the Rogu, where a giant Rogu shoves Tuttle's car with Tuttle in it up his ass, which we don't get to see Tuttle at any point after that scene in that episode. So we could just go ahead and assume that Tuttle didn't make it through that tunnel. Or we could even go way further back to the very first Al Tuttle episode, Don't Look a Smith Horse in the Mouth, where Tuttle is shown off as like morbidly obese, like way more, like just inhumanly, like so huge that it looks like he could just die of anything at any moment right then and there. And we see him in that form as that fat Tuttle for another 2 episodes, like the one episode immediately following that episode, and then also the Missing Kink episode. And I think this is where Tuttle became a ghost. He probably died of his just unhealthy weight. Perhaps his kink got him way too excited, and his already bad heart became worse or something like that, and he just died there, which could explain like why he's exercising in the mall, just walking. He's just trying to become a better him in his afterlife than when he was in his previous life or whatnot, which is why we get to see a more normal looking Tuttle for the rest of the show, which explains a theory I've had about Tuttle for a while. So first thing is that Tuttle being dead and a ghost can explain that one weird segment of him summoning mini versions of himself going rough in that Top of the Steve episode, and it can explain like any other form of supernatural things involving him, like going back to how he survived Rogu's tunnel, but also him being a ghost kind of explains like the jobs that he takes and the situations he kind of appears in. So let's look at the jobs that he usually takes, which are usually just jobs that are in lone work environments. I'll sort of explain that in a bit. In Flea Biscuit, he's a dog race announcer, so he's just off in the booth all alone, and the only time people can see, or not see him, but they just hear him. And then in I Am the Jeans, he's the home shopping network guy. He's only seen at 3 a.m. Sure, there's a crew around, but really like that 3 a.m. spot and like him being on stage, it's just him, working it alone. And then we have the Census of Lambs, which is kind of an outlier, but really all he is just training the group of census takers, since we don't see him take any census numbers afterwards. So, just a small closed environment for Tuttle. Then also, if we look at the times when Tuttle is interacting with people, it's usually just with the Smiths. Sure, there are times where he's interacting with other people, but most of the time it's just the Smiths that he's interacting with. So if we go back to the mob episode, Tuttle was agoraphobic, and then also if we go back to his debut episode, the reason he got so fat was because his wife died, and the reason he even hired the kids in that episode was just because he was extremely lonely. So what if his ghost powers make it so that he's sort of subconsciously manifesting these situations where he's kind of punishing himself, where
Guys?
Yeah, they're right, Al. You just slow him down, just smile, you fat clown, and walk away.
Catch you next time, homies.
Oh, hey, fun. The whole family's mall walking. What do you think? Could old Al use a few laps? Even hear yourself. Oh, hey, Vaughn, the whole family's more walking. Yeah, oh, you're the town fool. Let's get out of here with your dignity. Smell you on the flip side, skater boys. The hell was that?
He's still alone. He's in these situations where he's not really getting that much interaction, and that the only moments of him escaping that loneliness is when he's around the Smiths. So what if Tuttle is just fighting against his own powers just to enjoy the life that he didn't have before his untimely death? Or, you know, this could just be some nonsense theory that has a bunch of holes in it and can be torn apart easily, but who really cares? This video is almost like 19 minutes long, so don't forget to downvote, and don't leave a comment. This video sucked. See you later.
Resident Evil